They sat at a small handcrafted pine table, sipping from their mugs and gazing out the kitchen window into the darkness. A small, cinnamon-scented candle's flame flickered on the sill, but neither the man nor the woman noticed. Country music played in the background, but neither listened. They had not spoken for a while, instead choosing to nurse their coffees and thoughts in silence. Tears occasionally leaked from her eyes, coming in erratic spurts as her mind returned to the reality of what they faced and the choices they had made. Her husband's eyes were dry, but his sad and defeated look aged his appearance well beyond his 60 years. A barely audible click came from the clock on the wall, drawing her attention. 10 o'clock in the morning. Wouldn't know it, she muttered, and her eyes filling with tears once again. An old golden retriever lying in the corner lifted her head in anticipation, but when no more words followed, she dropped back down, an eternal sadness reflected in her eyes. The husband and wife turned as one to the tablet on the counter, streaming the news. Halfway around the world, someone in Auckland was being interviewed on a street corner in the dark, discussing how New Zealand was likely the last significant landmass to receive direct sunlight before it faded away. Underneath, snippets of breaking news detailed riots happening across the world's cities, demonstrations at government buildings, massive religious gatherings, and crowds demanding refuge at United Nations and other shelters. The husband shook his head. Even when Brian called last night, I still refused to believe it, he said with shame. I went to sleep thinking how stupid all of these smart people were, looking forward to laughing at them in the morning when nothing happened. I guess the laugh is on me. He took a deep breath, then continued pleading. How was I supposed to know? People are always predicting the end of the world, preparing for an apocalypse that never happens. Even this time, half the scientists said it was impossible for the sun to burn out, while the other half calculated it to the minute. Who are you supposed to believe? He asked. A few tears formed in his eyes this time, too. He looked down at the table, unable to face her. I guess believing in our sun would have been a good start, he said quietly. I'm so sorry, honey. She started to reach across the table to touch his hands, but he pulled away, full of shame, squeezing his eyelids shut to push the wetness from his eyes. He stood and walked to the stove, keeping his face from her view as he tried to regain control of his emotions. He lifted the old cast-iron pot and poured a fresh inch of hot coffee into his mug. His eyes now dry, he looked over at her and raised the coffee pot in her direction. It's decaf, he said, and she nodded her desire for more, though knowing she would not likely drink it. She lifted her cell phone and rolled it back and forth in her hands. Should I try the girls one more time? She asked. Sure, though, the circuits are probably still busy. Her thumbs made a few movements on the cell phone, but then placed it back on the table after hearing the familiar busy tone. Did you let the neighbors know? I wonder how long they'll last in their basement shelter, she said. Well, they're relying on the grid for their power. Brian says that even though the government beefed up the power plants, they didn't have enough time to prepare the grid to handle the expected increase in demand. They also have no idea how long the utility lines and equipment will last as it gets colder. Robbie and Alice probably won't last much longer than anyone else. She walked over to him at the window, placing her arm around the man she'd loved since high school. How long would we last? She asked, though they had already discussed it several times. I don't know. A little while. Brian says the planet will drop below zero after a few days, gradually dropping to 100 below within the year. After that, it would be hundreds of years before the temperatures drop enough for the atmosphere to collapse. At that point, I guess everyone is done for. I suppose as long as the power remained on, we could pump up the heat, maybe put our space heaters downstairs, and try to keep warm in the basement. If we filled up the tub and other containers with water, the food in the pantry would keep us for a little while, maybe a month or two. He reflected on the shortages over the past months as businesses broke down and people began hoarding any canned, bottled, and dry food that managed to reach grocery store shelves. Even skeptical people like themselves were buying whatever they could find just to keep food on the table. Basic items like toilet paper and soap had become a luxury, demanding exorbitant prices. The government supposedly stockpiled all kinds of food, but how are we supposed to get it once it's too cold to drive? And are any gas stations going to remain open? Why would anything remain open? Why would anyone want to work when their days are numbered and money has no value? He couldn't disguise that he had resigned to their fate. They embraced in a long, warm hug. The lights dimmed, then flickered, before returning to normal. Huh, that didn't take long, he said under his breath. He felt his heart skip a beat, imagining unrelenting darkness and cold growing all around them, like icy tentacles reaching for them through the cracks around the doors and windows. Some of the others were planning to meet at church later today. Maybe we should go, she asked. I'll do whatever you'd like, honey, he replied. I guess that never really was our thing, she conceded. Why start now? I'm where I want to be, with you. It would have been nice to see the kids one more time. He didn't respond. They had discussed this several times as well. The youngest, their 27-year-old son, was in Texas, while their two daughters resided in California and Colorado. The kids were a long, frightful journey from the couple's home in Virginia. She pulled him tighter as they stared at each other in the window's reflection, where the sun would normally be cresting over the trees, now hidden in darkness. She took the cup of coffee, and they both sipped from their mugs, savoring the rich aroma. At least Brian got into one of the UN shelters. I hope he can help the girl, she said. He nodded and blew out the candle. Together, holding hands, they left the kitchen, the retriever padding along behind. Soon afterward, they were cuddled on their bed, her head on his arm, once again gazing at each other. He watched her eyes slowly close for the last time, then closed his and joined her, an empty bottle of sleeping tablets on the nightstand, and the retriever lying still in the corner.